Hello and welcome to my latest stitching obsession. That's right, I just cannot get enough of these hexagons. And I'm just finishing up this piece here that's part of my underwater themed stitchy make-along that we're doing over on my Ko-fi page. And I will leave a link below for you if you're interested in finding out more about that. It's a subscription program where we are making all kinds of underwater stitchy things. So this all started when I watched a video on Emma Jones' Vintage Sewing Box channel, and she called these Quilt-as-you-go hexagons the perfect quilting project. And I have to agree with her. They are just so cool to make, and you can make them as complicated or as simple as you want, and also any size you want. And the basic idea is that this is a 3-layer sandwich. There's the top layer, there's a layer of quilt batting in the middle, and I use 100% cotton quilt batting, and then there's the backing fabric that gets folded over and stitched onto the front piece to completely encase the sandwich here. So when you finish making your block, it's done. It's completely finished, and then you just go on to your next block, and you can decide to make as many or as a few as you like. If you make one, you could use it as a coaster. If you make several, it could be a table runner. If you want to spend the rest of your life making quilt blocks, you could perhaps make a quilt that will cover a king-size bed. It's really entirely up to you, and you don't have to commit to any particular size when you start. You just make your blocks and they're completely encased. As you go along, you can start stitching them together. And I thought this was such a nifty idea that I suggested it to my social stitching group, and everybody loved the idea, and we've been having a really good time making these blocks, and we've been really having a lot of fun sort of rearranging them because they're two-sided, so there's so many options. So I used a CD to create the templates for the blocks. And I know that there are all kinds of templates that quilters use, or some people download their hexagon templates off the internet, and I don't have a printer, and I like to use simple materials that I have at home. So let me show you how I made my template using a CD. You start out by tracing your circle twice. So both of these circles that you trace need to be the same size. You can use any size circle you want, but the two circles that you trace should be the same size. And because these were making a geometric shape that has specific proportions, accuracy is important here. I know I'm all about sort of a free-form thing and doing what you want, but precision and accuracy do have a place, and this is one of those places. So once you've drawn your two circles, you set one of the circles aside and then cut out the other circle quite accurately along the line. And I am not very good at cutting, so is my circle going to be absolutely perfect? No, but I am trying to stay on the line and not go too far off the line, if you know what I mean. Right? So don't obsess if there's little imperfections, but you don't want big imperfections in this shape. So go all the way around, cutting all the way around. And then once my circle's cut out, I'm going to fold it in half. And again, matching up the edges so this is fairly accurate. So fold it in half, make a nice crease there, and then fold it in half again. So now I've got a quarter off my circle. That little wedge there is a quarter off the circle. Now I'm going to use that to make some marks on my other circle, the one I haven't cut out. So I'm just going to make one mark that crosses the line anywhere, it doesn't matter. And this is where I realized that it would have been helpful if I had made the two circles a different colors. It doesn't matter. You don't have to do this part. I'm just coloring in the corners here so that you can see them more easily. But at home, you'll be able to see what's going on. So now I'm going to line up one off those edges with the mark that I made, and then I'm going to slide my wedge so that the next corner lines up with the circle, and I'm going to make a mark there. And then I'm going to move my wedge over and line up the corner with the next mark and make another mark. And I'm going to keep going around the circle, moving moving the edge to the next mark, and then making one mark further along where the next edge lines up. And then when I get all the way back to the beginning, and again, this is, fairly, you want to do this fairly accurately. And if you do it accurately, when you get back to the beginning, that last corner will match up with your first mark. And, mine's not perfect, but it's good enough. So once you've made those marks, and if they don't line up, if they're quite far off, then try again. Now, once you've done that, you're going to go around your circle and with a straight edge, draw lines from one mark to the one that comes next. You can make other patterns too if you join up other combinations of marks like this. If you connect up the marks that are directly across from each other, you will divide your piece into a series of wedges. This will come in handy if you ever need to divide your pizza or your pie into 6 equal pieces. So once you've done that, now you can go along and cut out your perfectly formed hexagon. And I think this is pretty magical, but when I said that to my daughter, she said, "Mom, it's not magic, it's math." And then she went on to talk about equilateral triangles. There's 6 of them here. If you're a math person and you care about those things, there are 6 of them there. And if you're not a math person and don't care, it doesn't matter. But you still made a hexagon using math that you didn't even know you could do. And so this is now the size that I'm going to use as my template to cut out my cloth. So this is the finished size of my hexagons, so there's no seam allowance. The template is the finished size of my hexagons without any seam allowance. So when I'm cutting that back piece that I want to fold over, I need to remember to cut outside of those lines to leave a seam allowance. And you can see my poor cutting skills there. And the circle in the middle, I'm just using it as a weight instead of pinning things down, because then I'm not going to damage my hexagon. So if you were cutting your front or the batting, it would be the exact size of the yellow template that I made. So I like to sew with the front piece and the batting attached to each other, and all the messy backside goes on the back of the quilt batting. It's a nice firm surface to stitch on. But in this case, I actually stitched with all 3 layers together, and you can see the stitching all the way through, and you can do it either way. It's entirely up to you. And here are some of the quilt blocks that I have in my personal collection. These are bigger ones. I used a pot lid to trace the hexagon template for these, and some friends of mine had this idea to do a friendship quilt block exchange where they're making quilt blocks for each other and swapping, and they offered to make me some hexagons. This is some hand-painted tie-dye effect fabric with 2 different patterns on either side, and there I think that it's interesting to see how the stitching shows up differently on each of the sides. Now this one is very cool because she used the pattern in the fabric to guide her stitching, and it has a different effect on the other side. This one too uses the pattern in the fabric to guide the stitching, as a guide to the stitching, and then on the back it creates these little bursts in the crazy quilt pattern there. This one is interesting because you can see the row of the white stitches there, but there's a row of red stitches in between the white stitches that you can barely see, and you flip it over, the white stitches disappear and you can see the red stitches on the other side. That's really fun. This one uses a similar principle where the stitching is all done in red thread in the flowers, and then you see all these bursts on the other side. Love it, love it, love it, love it. This one too, I love how the stitching looks like grass on that side, but you flip it over and it makes sense, right? It follows the lines. This is another tie-dyed painted piece. Anyway, I thoroughly love my Quilt-as-you-go hexagon collection, and hopefully I've inspired you to make some of your own, and if not, go watch Emma Jones' videos. She's got a series of them, and you might even spot some of our collaborative hexagons in one of her videos where she shows what other people have been doing. So I'm just going to finish this last edge on my on my underwater piece here. And if you've been inspired to join us in the underwater stitchy make along, like I said before, I put the link to all the details in the description box below, and I hope to see you there. If not, happy stitching, and I'll see you on my channel again soon. Bye for now.